ask for the approval of the agenda, please, for motion and a second to approve the agenda. And can I get, for the record, can I get the name of the person who makes the motion and the second, please?
Shepherd.
Okay. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Thank you. Ask for public comments.
Mr. Chairman, we received no public comments in advance, and I see no one wishing to address the TPO board this morning.
That brings us to agenda item number 4, the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Crum?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So included in your monthly agenda is my Executive Director's Report. I would be happy to answer any questions regarding that information. Just a couple of things I did want to bring to board members' attention today. First off, you will notice around our building, we've installed 3 new information monitors that we are going to be utilizing to convey the work of the PDC and TPO to our general public and to our members who participate in our meetings. One is in the 757 room that we used this morning. We're still working on some of the technology, but we're dialing it in. One is right outside of or in the main lobby as you come into the regional building, and one, of course, is right outside here. So we live stream our meetings. They will be live streaming on the monitors as they're conducted. Which gives people a chance, if they're not comfortable in being in a crowded room, other places to view our meetings. But what we're really excited about is the opportunity to display some information on our regional work. So in that light, today, you're going to see in honor of GIS Day, right, Del? You're seeing a rotation of some maps that our TPO and PDC professionals have created that analyze information and data. So hope you'll, as you're going in between meetings today and having lunch, have an opportunity to view those. I just want to give a shout out to 3 people that helped put that together. Of course, Dale Stith, Sarah Kidd, our GIS manager, see Kyle Gilmer in the back there, working with Matt Kleppi. So I appreciate them putting that together for today. Mr. Chairman, I also just want to take a moment with your permission and recognize a couple people today. And I know, as everybody's aware, we have new board members who get appointed. We have other board members that their terms end and move on. But we do have a couple people I just wanted to give a shout out to and recognize today. So this will be the last board meeting for a couple of TPO board members. I know some are here, some are not, but I do just want to recognize them quickly. First off, I think everybody's aware Mayor McKinley Price gave his last State of the City last evening, which was a wonderful event. Mayor Price has been an HRTPO board member for 12 years. And if I pause and think about everything that's happened in 12 years, Mayor Tuck, thinking about when he began, some of these projects were a dream and now they're being built. But obviously Mayor Price's participation here has been very impactful at the regional level. From Poquoson, we do have Council Member Herbert Green, who's been with us for 11 years, and I don't believe the council member's been able to attend today. He is on his way. But Mr. Green, 11 years as well, representing Poquoson, providing input at this Regional Transportation Policy Board. Really appreciate that service. And then from the city of Franklin, we have Mayor Raybill, who's been with us for 2 years. Now, some are here and some are not, but in a moment, I want to ask those that are here to come forward for a photo with Mayor Tuck. But Mayor Tuck, before we do that, why don't I turn it over to you for any comments? I will, though, Mayor, pause a second and say, I see my phone lighting up here, so I may be missing some people. If I've missed anybody, please, I don't want to overlook anyone, that this might be their last meeting. Mayor Tuck, before we do photos, why don't I turn it over to you, sir?
Well, let me, first of all, thank you for what you've done and what you've given to this board in your service. And I do want to just say something about Mayor Rabel, that, I mean, he comes and he sits quietly. He's always dignified with his bow tie. And one day I had an opportunity to talk to him just about, A, his background, and B, perhaps why he's never chaired one of our boards, because I think we've got a broad tent, a broad bench, and I think there should be an opportunity for everyone to serve. And with his own modesty, he told me the reason why. But he's been certainly a contributor to this board to make it better. And that's not to overlook anybody and their contributions. And certainly Mayor Price and I have had some extensive conversations, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes over the phone, sometimes through text. But I also recognize his accomplishments and his contributions. And even though Councilman Green's not here, we recognize again what Pocosin has done and contributed. We are a region. I think we're strong because of the fact that we're not about egos, but about everybody trying to make sure that the region advances as a unit and not as individual bodies or localities. So with that said, I want to thank you all. And actually for those of you who, I don't know all those who ran in this past election, but congratulations to you. I don't know anyone else as eager as Mayor Price to step aside. I mean, he even told us the number of days he has left. I think it was 47. Was that it, Mayor Price? See, all right. But anyway.
How many minutes, McKinley? How many minutes?
Yeah. But again, I just want to thank you all for your contributions and just wish you the very, very best.
Mayor Tuck, since Mr. Green's along the way, I might suggest just a little audible. If we could wait, I'd like to get that photo when all of our outgoing members are here. So we'll just pause the meeting when that happens. Matt will be ready to go, but we would like to take a couple photos that we could provide back to our departing members. So, okay?
That is fine.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. With that, we're going to move to the individual reports, and we'll start with the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Mr. Stant.
Thank you, Mayor Tuck. We had a busy month at the Commonwealth Transportation Board. We had our meeting on October 24th in Virginia Beach. It was right before the Governor's Transportation Conference started the next day. It was also held in Virginia Beach. Some highlights of that were it was a great conference, fully attended, great job by Secretary Shep Miller and Commissioner Seabridge and their staff. It was a great event, and again, it was fully attended. Weren't any more people could get into the meeting. I also want to point out that Mr. Crum and Mr. Page did an excellent job in presenting a list and a description of Hampton Roads District projects at a session in the conference. Highlights of the Transportation Board. The board affirmed the preferred alternative to the Bowers Hill Exchange, which will consist of 2 managed lanes in each direction and a paved drivable shoulder. The next step in that process is an EIS statement that we expect this winter and the final EIS determination in the spring of 2023. We reported that we're working on a design for a flyover at I-64 East and 464 South interchange. At the December meeting, VDOT will recommend the CTB award Hampton Roads Express Lane Segment 1A. And finally, there were some revisions to the 6-year improvement plan that affect Hampton Roads, including $470 million for the I-64 gap, $10 million for Nemo Parkway in Virginia Beach, $79 million for regional transportation, and an additional $30 million to maintain for maintenance to localities that maintain their roads. This report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next is VDOT update, Mr. Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple highlights, and as always, you have our full update in the back of your packet there for your review. We do have the 264 interchange Phase 2 work complete. That project's in closeout. You all drive through there. All of those components of that project are open. So happy to share that. Next is a high-rise bridge. Our contractor came in with their latest schedule. We're looking at about a 90-day delay on that project, unfortunately. This is mainly due to the last pieces of work on that project really are the final paving work, which is obviously temperature sensitive. And during this time of year, they're working through their final paving plan, but right now our update on that is sometime in the early April timeframe for completion of that project. And I just want to recognize the city of Chesapeake and their staff and their really great cooperation with us as key stakeholders in that project of working through some difficult traffic interruptions and changes as we work with the contractor to speed that project up as much as possible. So thanks there to the city of Chesapeake and their leadership. And as Mr. Stamp mentioned, we are on track to award segment 1A next month. And that will be the second of two of our express lane projects will be under construction at that time. So we'll have the Hampton segment, and we'll have the first of the two Norfolk segments under construction. Pending any questions, that concludes my answer.
Thank you. Now we have Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Mr. Brule.
Good morning. A couple of updates for DRPT. We are in the process of updating our fiscal year 23 budget and 6-year program. We'll be taking that to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in December. It's a minor revenue adjustment and some additional projects that we're going to be able to fund through our Transit Ridership Incentive Program. At the same time, we're getting ready to open our fiscal year 24 application cycle. We are facing some pretty significant challenges. Earlier this week, I briefed the House Appropriations Committee along with Commissioner Britch on the pressures that inflation is making on our program and some challenges we have with supply chain. And from that perspective, I'll leave you with this. We just have recompeted our statewide bus contracts. We do that as a way of making things easier for our transit partners to be able to procure the vehicles that they need to operate their services. It gives us an economy of scale because we purchase so many as a group. We've seen our prices for the large buses go up 27% in this new bid. Electric buses went up 36%. And for the small vehicles that are used for paratransit, for our human service providers, those we've seen go up 80%. And most concerning with those small vehicles is our lead time has gone from 6 months to 3 years because we're competing for chassis and chips with Amazon and other folks that use that same body style. So we have some real challenges ahead in terms of how we manage a program that's really dealing with an unprecedented level of inflation while we make sure that we keep the services running smoothly and they're reliable. So we have some tools in our toolbox. I'm not going to go through all those today, but we're working to do some work to mitigate that for our transit agencies. But you'll hear from them as they work on their budgets and they start to see the impacts of these new contracts work their way through the capital program. So just wanted to make you aware of that as well. I'm happy to answer any questions before we talk about VPRA.
Great. Well, now we'll do the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority with Mr. Brule and Ms. Drake.
So I get the great privilege in my position of also serving as the chair of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority Board. And it's been a great year. So I've sad, depressing news on the transit side with inflation, but we've got a lot of good news to share on the VPRA front. Back in July, we started a 3rd round trip train to Norfolk and a 2nd round trip train to Roanoke, partially because of those additions, but because of incredibly increased demand. We set a new ridership record for Amtrak Virginia in July of over 110,000 riders. We broke our own record in August with 119,000 passengers. September, ridership went down just a little bit. That's typical at the end of the summer, but we did set an all-time September record of carrying over 105,000 passengers, which is the largest September ridership ever, and a 37% increase over September of 2019, so pre-COVID. So rail is moving Virginia. Our passenger program is growing by leaps and bounds. I know whenever we start to talk about that, everybody gets excited about more rail coming to Hampton Roads and how do we get there? And all roads lead through Long Bridge. And so we're working to advance the Long Bridge project. We've passed the 15% mark in terms of plans, design. We expect to be at 30% in early 2023. We are actively working on getting that project out the door for procurement with a goal of having Long Bridge completed and open to passenger rail traffic in 2030. So we're also fighting inflationary pressures on that side of the program, but we know that Long Bridge opens the keys to the kingdom for us to get additional rail service into Richmond and Hampton Roads and then to Roanoke and the New River Valley. So working very aggressively to make that happen. And turn it over to Thelma if she has anything else to add.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, certainly I'm very delighted to be appointed to the Passenger Rail Authority. I have only attended 2 meetings so far. They meet quarterly. This month, fortunately, we don't conflict with you because it's the 3rd Thursday of the month when we meet. So January, Jennifer and I, neither one of us will be here. I wanted you to know that my husband and I took the Newport News train. We went to Norfolk. We got on the bus. The bus was full at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Went over to Newport News so we could ride that train. Huge amount of people, just as Jennifer's telling you, but I was completely stunned since the last time I rode the train at the difference in ridership. So I wanted my husband to see, number one, how nice the bus ride is. It really should be a tourist attraction. I mean, because you see everything. You see the Newport News shipyard, you see you're going over 664 and through the Monitor Merrimack. It really just shows you so much of our region. And then we came back with Jennifer the next day on the train. They had the whole glass back so that we could see all of the projects for Northern Virginia and moving down. And of course, a little bit of conversation about our service, Newport News service, the work that'll be done in the future. Because remember, the focus right now is getting the 95 corridor, Long Bridge, and those things done. But widening of the Appomattox Bridge, which right now is one track, that almost prevented us from getting train service to Norfolk, but we did get CSX to agree. So that's something we'll be very happy to see. But I wanted to encourage all of you. We have 5 train services out of Norfolk right now, thanks to the work of DRPT. So don't ever hesitate to take that bus. And then we came back into Norfolk. Our car was there. But really great to see both. I thought it was good for Ted, who's heard me talk about this forever, both types of service, from Norfolk to Newport News and then from Norfolk to DC.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Ms. Drake, for rearranging your schedule to be with us today.
Thank you.
And since you spoke so eloquently about the rail service into our region, I also probably don't have to read my little note here to encourage you to expand our passenger commuter rail service here into Hampton Roads.
Well, and I think that is part of the long-range plan as another train out of Norfolk. Jennifer would.
Yeah, we'll have another train in Newport News and then some additional service into Norfolk once we get Long Bridge done.
Super. Thank you. And Mr. Amoroso was just bubbling as you were talking about the bus trip. So he's next to talk about transit agency update. Mr. Amoroso.
Thank you, Mayor Tuck. Just 2 quick things to report from HRT. We have a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Navy Base Circulator scheduled for December 2nd at 11 a.m. outside of the NEX complex on Hammond Drive near the dental clinic. For those that may not recall, HRT was a recipient of a state grant through the TRIP program. This is funding for 3 years, finally, for a Navy Base Circulator on base to serve the people that work on the base and live on the base. We're really excited about that. The other thing, on Election Day, November 8th, we provided free transit services on all our modes. I'm happy to report that we carried over 23,000 passengers on Tuesday, November 8th, helping people get to the polls. So that's a quick report from HRT.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd just like to thank Ray. I know he's worked years and years on all the projects around here in Hampton Roads, and it's been a big supporter of the Navy in making sure that we have transportation, particularly the circulator, and he's been on it for several years, and the Navy thanks him very much. Thank you, Ray.
And WADA, welcome, Ms. Davis.
Thank you. With Zach exiting and his reports last month, that's the same updates that we are working on, continuing to work on as far as the new ABL system, for our business surveillance system, and we are still struggling with staff shortages. We are working on new outreach to see who we could pull in and partner with.
Thank you. And may I ask, as you give your reports, if you bring your mic a little closer to you, I think we're also live streaming this today. Yes, so I want to make sure that everyone hears who are viewing from other places. Now we're going to have the Virginia Port Authority. Ms. Bick.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We continue to make great progress on the dredging project. The west side of Thimble Shoals Channel will be complete with the deepening by December 22nd. So great celebration of the first segment being complete. The east side of Thimble Shoals Channel deepening and widening will be complete at the beginning of March. The Army Corps will be doing the next segment, which is we're going to start on the Newport News side because we can use that material to then raise the dikes at Craney Island so that all of the inner harbor material can be taken at Craney Island. So that contract has been awarded and notice to proceed has been given. So as soon as the environmental window opens back up, they will start construction next month. And then finally, the widening of Thimble Shoals West will also start as soon as Great Lakes is done on the east side. They'll move over to the west side to do that widening. As far as volumes go, you know, you've probably for the first time ever in your life heard more about supply chain than you ever wanted to. As the rest of the nation has been in crisis, the Port of Virginia was actually named the #1 most efficient port in North America because of the fluidity that we have maintained while everyone else was melting down. That's due in large part to the technology that we have put in, but also a tremendous dedicated staff and the international longshoremen who work there every day, who showed up even during COVID. We are starting to see volumes meter out a little bit. You may recall we had 25% growth, then 15% growth year over year compounded on top of that. That's not sustainable. People are back to work. They're not sitting at home pointing and clicking. Also, the behavior globally was to bring cargo in just in case, not just in time. So I'm pretty sure everything that you're purchasing for Christmas was here in April. And the warehouses continue to be full, but we're starting to see, but as my CEO likes to put it, we are coasting off the wave. We are not nosediving off the top like some of the other ports who are now just being decimated by reductions in volumes. We're still doing quite well. And most importantly, we're continuing to see a lot of investment by developers from around the country who have never invested in Virginia before. And that's for cross docks, distribution centers, fulfillment centers. You know, we used to go to the mall, right, when it was time for back to school shopping. We don't do that now. We sit in our homes and we point and we click and we get our new shoes and our backpacks and we wait for it to show up at our door. In order to do that, we have to have these fulfillment centers and these distribution centers to get cargo where it needs to go. And so we've had some very successful projects recently approved in Chesapeake and in Hampton and in Suffolk. And we really appreciate the partnership and the embracing of those jobs and opportunities, and more important than ever that we continue to work together on transportation planning and making sure that cargo can move through those corridors fluidly and not become a burden to the residents of our great communities that we live in. So thank you for that, and we continue to work with you on that moving forward. If any of your newly elected council folks would like to come to the port and do a tour, we had the pleasure of hosting the Commonwealth Transportation Board recently. I think it really helps them to understand the context and the connectivity with the port in our communities. So please reach out if that's something that you all would like to do. Thank you for the time this morning, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. Freight Transportation Advisory Committee, Mr. Everly.
Good morning, thank you. Kathy covered a number of the items related to freight quite well, so I won't repeat those. Our next meeting is in early December, and other than that, we don't have any new, any new items to bring forward this morning.
Community Advisory Committee, Mr. Godoldig Islavsky.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, commissioners. You received our report from the last meeting that we held. Our next meeting is in the month of December, so happy Thanksgiving.
Our military liaisons, U.S. Navy, Mr. King.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We've had a revolving door with our Chief of Staff position here in the Navy due to various reasons, assignments, transfers, et cetera. So we're looking at about 2 more months till we get a permanent Chief of Staff in that you'll see probably for maybe at least a year, year and a half. Captain Bentz could not make it today. He's wearing 3 hats. The Admiral's on travel and others are out. So he gives his best wishes and thank you very much.
And thank you. And that brings us to agenda item number 15, Mr. Crum.
Yes, we're going to bring to the podium our Chief Economist, Greg Grutendorf. Greg is going to present to you the 2050 socioeconomic forecasts that he has developed, which will be important inputs into our long-range transportation plan. Greg?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to apologize up front. This is not going to be an exciting presentation full of economics charts. This is going to be process. But we'll get through it and have a little bit of fun, I hope, anyways. So the 2050 socioeconomic forecast, you probably just, remember approving the 2045 forecast, and you're like, are we starting this again? Yes, it's Dale's fault. But here we go with the 2050 forecast, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about what this is and why. So starting with why are we doing a forecast for 2050? It serves as input data to the 2050 LRTP, the plan that you're going to be hearing a lot about in the next coming years. It really provides an impartial and consistent set of projections that gets used for planning the region's future. We do it for the TPO, but it's not just the TPO that uses it. A lot of other organizations end up using this forecast as well. What is in the forecast? This is really what we hear from what needs to feed the model. So we have population forecast, employment by place of work that's broken down into 4 sectors: retail, industrial, office, and other. We have employment by place of residence, we call workers, forecast number of households, and then passenger vehicle registrations. So what the forecast is, and I stress this, the forecast really serves as input data for the LRTP. We need the data to get somewhat of an understanding of what we expect to see in 2050 so we can plan for the future. It gets used in the prioritization process, and the forecast itself can go through scenario planning. So we have one set of numbers, but we can use those numbers in different ways, which is helpful. What the forecast is not, this is not an economic development tool. It's not optimistic. We're not trying to say how many people do we think we can get here. It's not a growth management tool trying to limit growth by saying how many people will be here. And it most definitely is not destiny. 2050 is a long, long way away. I could not have forecasted 2021 in 2019. We really, really are struggling to forecast pretty near to the future, much less all the way to 2050. So we recognize that a lot is going to happen between now and 2050. That's why every 4 or 5 years we go through, we do another forecast, we try again, and we try and get closer and closer. So how do we do this? One of the things that the way we start this forecast is we just look at best practices do a literature review. And just like most things with Dale's LRTP process, we actually do a fantastic job of patting ourselves on the back here. When you compare us to how other MPOs do this, we really do go over and above like the rest of the LRTP. So we do the literature review just to see the best practices. We don't just take data that's out there easily collect, but we work with our localities to get locality input. Our planning directors see this data routinely, the methodology and the draft totals before we publish anything. We work to make sure that the raw data is correct. We analyze our research assumptions and we change model inputs as appropriate. So where we are right now, we did the lit review, we did all the data collection, the draft control totals were done and reviewed with the LRTP subcommittee and TTAC, and also with the planning directors. Earlier, TTAC approved the draft totals unanimously, so where we are today is at that last bullet there. So how we do this in a way that you try to make sense of this, we model the region in two separate ways. We have the south side model and a peninsula model. And really what we're looking at, and I'll explain a little bit more of this later, but really what we're looking at is how is employment going to drive population growth in the region? We look at the south side and the peninsula, and then we come up with control totals for each of those. And then we look at what's going on within each locality. We talk to your planning departments, planning directors. We look at past trends. We look at what the data is. We actually go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and Virginia Employment Commission. We get the raw data that nobody else is supposed to see, so we can have the actual numbers, come up with locality growth rates, and then we use those to meet our control total. So it's called a top-down, bottom-up strategy. We have our top limit, and then we use the locality growth rates to reach it. So Dale wanted me to be here a long time ago, probably a year ago, and I kept telling Dale, wait, we need the good data from the 2020 census, so hold on, let's just wait. My bad. The 2020 census data is not great. In fact, a lot of our data is not great. So we shouldn't have waited. Sorry, Dale. But that has cost us a little bit of, economists love qualifications. So here we have some of the frustrations we've run up against. Some of the 2020 employment numbers, we just know they're completely wrong. They're not a good indicator of what's going to happen. So for the sake of simplicity and consistency, we went with 2019 employment numbers, except for the military data, which is way off base, no pun intended. But the Bureau of Economic Analysis changed their methodology. We worked with our partners at the Military and Federal Facility Alliance and ODU to ask our congressional delegation to actually change how the BEA is using military numbers. So we should see that changed soon. But right now, we're just going with 2015 military personnel because that seems to be the most accurate. There's also alternate population data. Usually we would just take what the Weldon Cooper Center says is accurate because they do a phenomenal job with that. Unfortunately, there's some anomalies. For example, Norfolk saw their population decrease by 10,000 people in the census, and Weldon Cooper Center will use the census figure. We talked to Norfolk and they're challenging the census, so we're going to go with the old estimate for Norfolk, and there's other things like Williamsburg. Their 2020 population count declined significantly due to COVID, so we're using alternate population assumptions there as well. There's also a number of technological changes that we understand will be happening in the future. We talked to the planning directors about that, environmental assumptions, even employment assumptions. There's an old adage that 50% of the new jobs 15 years from now have not been invented yet. So as you might imagine, if you're forecasting employment in the future and you don't know what those jobs are, that can be somewhat difficult. And then add to that the social and demographic, natural growth and immigration. We used to have a pretty solid understanding of what was happening in natural growth, but that's changing, and immigration is certainly a wild card. So this is something I've never actually done before in a socioeconomic forecast for the region. Let's talk globally. This month, global population will hit 8 billion. In 2080, it's expected to peak at 10.4 billion. Anybody know what the most populous country in the world is? Almost. China is still the most populous. India should overtake China next year. So there's some fascinating things going on globally with population. China's population is expected to decrease to under 600,000 by 2100. But across the board, we're seeing huge declines in birth rates. So a replacement birth rate for a country like the US is suggested to be 2.1. That means 2.1 live births for every mother. And we have not had that number since the 70s. So essentially, it's been the immigration that has been boosting our population. We've seen a number of declines, but the lowest fertility rate in the US was in 2021. We actually saw a tiny little bump, perhaps an anomaly. But what we're seeing is declining birth rates globally, across race, across ethnicity, across socioeconomic status. And by 2050, there's expected that 60 countries will be realizing annual population declines. So the global population growth has slowed substantially. Between 2010 and 2020, 3 states lost population. Over a decade, 3 states, Illinois, Mississippi, and West Virginia, lost population. Last year, 17 states lost population. So we certainly are seeing changes in the way population is growing in this nation. So we look at Hampton Roads population growth or forecasted growth. What you can see here is an incredibly exciting chart that shows kind of more of the same, but it's a little bit deceiving when we look at historical numbers. So if we break this down and say, what were the population growth rates on an annualized basis between 1970 and 2020? You can see that they were much higher than they were between 2000 and 2020. And as we look out to 2050, the forecasted rates are expected to decline. And you might ask, well, why does the South Side have higher growth rates than the Peninsula? What's causing that? If you go back the last 50 years, the Peninsula has grown faster. And this is basically employment based. So it's employment projection based that we look at from Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment projections and others that say, where do we think growth is going to occur and what industries are in place right now? Remember, this is not destiny. So if we look at the components of population change, this is interesting. The blue line is births, the red line is deaths, and might be somewhat depressing to look at 2041, where regional deaths will outpace regional births. So where does the population come from? That's the green line, that's net migration. And in a region like this, we call it economic migration. And so if we have jobs, people want to come fill those jobs. And that's the expectation that our employment growth is going to be coming predominantly through economic in-migration at that time. So the jobs are expected to drive growth. If you look at a population histogram, if you think all the way back to 3rd grade when they show you that this is supposed to look like a Christmas tree, has not looked like a Christmas tree for some time, but this is what the population histogram for Hampton Roads looked like in 2020. You know, that triangle at the top is kind of, always has looked a little strange in Hampton Roads, especially with our military population. If we compare this to what it looked like in 1990, almost looks like a fighter jet. But it certainly looks quite a bit strange, even compared to 2020. You can see that, you know, the people in the school system know that we do have fairly few kids coming through K-12 education comparatively. But you can see where the bump is. Now, this is what we expect it to look like in 2050. So the aging of the population will certainly continue, but it almost looks like a rectangle there, which is somewhat strange. And certainly that'll impact our labor force if we forecast employment growth. Again, this is very conservative, consistent growth that we're expecting in the future based on what we see in front of us now. Of course, that could change. Labor force expectations are pretty interesting. We expect the labor force to grow. That's the blue line. But we expect the labor force participation rate to continue to slowly decrease. So the amount of people that are in the that are actually actively participating in the workforce, that number will continue to come down. Just real briefly, employment by sector. This is somewhat of a strange thing, and I probably get the most questions from your staff, your localities, and planning directors on this. And they're asking, you know, we have 4 different categories: retail, industrial, office, and other. And they ask us, what is that? Well, we get from VDOT a breakdown by industrial sector, by industry sector from the North American Classification Code system. And they tell us how much of each 2-digit industry sector is included in the retail, industrial, office, and other, and that's how we break it down. So this is always a little bit of a strange piece, and it's a bit difficult to explain, but we're simply following the VDOT guidance on this one. All these, I'm not going to bore you with all these tables. They're in your handout materials and in the package, but this is what the tables look like. And again, this has gone through the planning directors and TTAC. And with that said, you can look in your packet for these tables. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. I'll even take questions on China and India.
Well, first, I want to thank Mr. Gudendorf for that excellent presentation, and secondly, ask if there are any questions or comments, because you're going to be asked to take action on this as far as receiving the report.
Mayor Tuck, may I? Greg, I wonder, you know, as a metropolitan region, we talk a lot about those regions we're competing with, right? And we always hear about Nashville, and we always hear about the Research Triangle Park, or we always think about Seattle, and this year we're doing the visit to Charleston. Can you talk just high level about, are those regions seeing the same type of trends that you've talked about today? Or, you know, a lot of times we think about some of these trends being unique to us, but as you're pointing out, they're really nationwide type of trends. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So if you compare the growth rates for metropolitan areas, they vary substantially. There's been a lot of metropolitan areas that have seen, you know, consistent decline, and other ones that have been growing substantially. So it really runs a gamut. If you compare what's been happening, if you just say compare Hampton roads to what's happening across the state, we are growing slower than Charlottesville and Richmond and Northern Virginia, substantially slower. And what is indicative about this is people are, you know, following the jobs. They're going where job opportunities are, and especially where higher paying jobs are. So if you have high paying jobs and you have an attractive region, people are going to those metropolitan areas. One of the things that I think people often confuse, you know, population growth, we really want to drive population growth. This population growth does not equate to quality of life. So my goal would not be to see population growth. It would be to see increased quality of life, whatever that looks like. So not having population growth doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing poorly. And having population growth can be really difficult. So I would say that those metrics can be a little bit deceiving, but it is substantially different across the U.S. and some of the places that if you look at who's growing and who's not growing, it's not as easy to say, you know, the Midwest is in decline and the Northeast is in decline. It's not, you know, some places are, but it really is up to the metro area and the jobs and the availability, the quality of life and the incomes that those places can afford.
Mr. Chairman. Greg, you know, I've talked with you and Sean a little bit about trying to understand participation rate better over the last several months. That seems to have generated the most news in terms of labor statistics. Is there anything that rises to the surface that you think the folks in this room could be doing or should be doing through budget and policy to drive the participation rate, or at least try and influence it?
Well, I think the number one thing that impacts the labor force participation rate is opportunity. And we saw that quite honestly with COVID. We saw a huge cut to the labor force participation rate because people couldn't access childcare. And that's kind of a strange thing. I know a number of years ago, a survey was done of small business on the peninsula, and the question was asked, what is the number one issue you are facing right now? It was childcare. So people don't necessarily associate livability with labor force. But that comes back to the quality of life issue. If you want to look at why people are leaving the labor force, you have to understand why. I know that, we look at opportunity here as one of the things where we see an out-migration of people in Hampton Roads. And quite honestly, we cannot compete with other metropolitan areas when it comes to wages and salaries. We pay less, so we fight internally to get candidates, from one jurisdiction to the other, but we're not attracting from outside of the region into the region because we simply don't pay what other metropolitan areas pay. So a couple things that I would point to is, number one, quality of life and what people have access to and how they can do their job, whether it's working from home or those kind of things. And the other thing is wages and salaries. Don't compare Virginia Beach to James City County. That's not helpful. Right? We need to be comparing ourselves to other metropolitan areas with which we're competing to when it comes to income. So that would be a big one.
Greg, you talked
Excuse me,
about,
pull your mic a little bit closer to you.
Greg, you talked about in the population and economic, you tying those two together. In your considerations, I know there's a lot of factors, but what's your thoughts as it applies to environmental issues?
So the environmental issues kind of run the gamut here, and they differ among localities. We really rely on the planning staff from the localities to kind of tell us what their expectations are, if they're going to see less land available for growth and less land available for construction. But in terms of looking out to 2050, I think it's just slowly starting to impact the forecast in a way that localities are saying that they're not going to develop or build in certain areas where, when I first started this 15 years ago, that was less the case. So I think it's slowly starting to have an impact, just the environmental factors. But there is, of course, a host of other environmental factors, and we just really have no idea on how they will play into the forecast. So in areas where we don't have a solid understanding, and in this kind of a jump, but I would say vehicles, the number of vehicles per household, we just don't know. We don't know what's going to change. Are people going to have fewer vehicles? Are they going to have more vehicles? And instead of just guessing one way or another, if we really don't have a solid understanding, we just hold the assumptions consistent. And I think that's true of many of the environmental assumptions being made at the localities right now too. We're not quite certain, and barring any degree of certainty, then it doesn't make sense to speculate.
Mayor Dyer.
Oh, thank you. And Greg, as usual, an outstanding presentation. My friend across the pond, Doug Pons, who's also the chair of Harumfa, and I and a delegation went to the Pentagon a couple weeks ago, and we had the opportunity to meet with the deputy secretaries of each branch of the military that represent the Hampton Roads area. And Doug, if I'm not mistaken, almost every one of them brought up the problems and the barriers of daycare as being a major, problem for the military also. We talked about the spouses being able to get into the job market, reciprocity with professional licenses of nurses and teaching and, wages. We also talked about the affordability of housing and everything. So a lot of the discussions that we had up in the Pentagon and a whole day really mirrored a lot about what we're doing right here and confronting in Hampton Roads. And, let me just say, if I'm not mistaken, were we still at around 46% of the GMP of this region is DOD related?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, in terms of, the problems that we're discussing here, we have to realize that, the military in all of our communities, is a major force of, once again, that we have to take into, consideration. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You bring up a really interesting point, actually. In the history of Hampton Roads, for what we have data for, there's only been 2 years where the region's population has declined, and both of those have been tied to the DOD pulling military personnel. And so the expectation for military personnel right now is flat, but you bring up another point with the DOD. They're not hitting their targets in terms of recruiting. And that undoubtedly will impact the region as well. If you can't hit your targets, then you're not going to be adding military personnel, and that will impact Hampton Roads disproportionately.
Mayor Price?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, one of the statements that the DOD made also was that they're going to electrify totally, whether we're ready or not. And we need to look at the economic impact on the region that they're planning to decarbonize all their facilities.
Mr. Price?
Thank you, Greg. This is a great presentation. I've done this work in the past, and I know how challenging it can be, how many variables, and you have, you're trying to take a 50,000 foot altitude, and then get information top down and bottom up. One of the bottom up pieces of information, not to change the forecast, but just for situational awareness of everybody. Chesapeake City Council this past Tuesday rezoned 1,400 acre property for industrial and office use, and we expect that one property will employ more people than the entire city's employment growth forecast over the next 30 years, and it's way more. There will be way more jobs likely located on that property by 2050, certainly than Chesapeake can accommodate. So we've started talking to the region city managers about, what does that look like? What kind of industries are likely coming? We'll continue to have those conversations, but it's just an example of how many changing conditions on any given Tuesday, can affect these forecasts. So it's a constant work in progress. But I just wanted to mention that for everyone, again, for everyone's awareness, and look forward to continue to working with you to make sure as we refine these moving forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Price, for messing up my forecast with this good news. I would say that one thing Dale and her LRTP team have done really well, and they're working on, I think, this time as well, is using the use of scenario planning to adjust the forecast to make sense of some of these changes that we think will probably come, we hope will come, or hope not, but we can use the scenario process to incorporate those changes.
Any other comments or observations? Again, we're going to ask to approve this forecast for use and development of the 2050 LRTP. And so I will ask for a motion in a second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposers, nay. Thank you. Item number 16, Mr. Crum.
Yes, Keith Nichols, our transportation engineer principal, will be sharing with you our HRTPO annual roadway performance report.
Thank you. So we recently released the 2022 edition of the annual roadway performance report. And this is a report that we produce as part of our performance management and our congestion management process activities here at the HRTPO. This document is also one that we release on an annual basis, along with a couple of what I would call sister efforts that we do as part of that. One of them is the regional system performance report. where we look at performance measures and a number of transportation modes in our region and how we're meeting or not meeting targets that this board has established in each of those areas. And also the State of Transportation report, which I'll have for this group at the next meeting in January. So in terms of the annual roadway performance report, it includes a wide variety of information on over 1,500 miles of roadway in our region. So just to give you an example of some of the information we include in this report, we have historical traffic volumes over the last 6 years for each of these roadway segments throughout the region. We also have average peak period speed data for the morning and the afternoon on each of these roadways where such data is collected. And then we also analyze the congestion levels and the duration of congestion during each peak period on average for each of these roadway segments. In the rest of my presentation today, I'll go over some of the other things we include in the report, and that includes some of the congestion maps we include in the study, also a summary of congestion in 2021 and how it compares to pre-pandemic conditions, and then also where we drill into a little more detail where we look at existing historical travel times in selected corridors throughout our region. So one of the things we look at in our report is the change in the amount of roadway travel in our region. And we do this through 80 locations throughout our region where traffic volume data is collected every second, hopefully every second throughout the year. And these locations are spread throughout the region on major roadways all throughout. So going back to the pandemic of 2020, looking at these 80 locations, we saw a decrease of about 14% in our traffic or roadway travel in our region. Primarily due to the pandemic. So when we looked at 2021, we did have an increase from those lows in 2020. It was an increase of about 10% in the year 2021. However, we still have not we have not achieved the pre-pandemic levels of traffic that we've seen in our region. If you look at this chart, what we experienced in 2021 was really comparable to what we saw really around 2010 to 2014 in our region. So we are seeing an increase, but not quite to the level we saw pre-pandemic. The next few slides, I've got examples of the maps that we include in the report. This one, for example, shows the congestion levels on the peninsula on average during the AM peak period. What really jumps out is the HRBT. Congestion has returned, not that it ever left, but it's really returned to the HRBT. I'll go into that in a little more detail when I talk more corridor-specific information, but that's what really jumped out on the peninsula when you look at morning congestion. When you look at the south side, it's a lot of the notorious locations, I guess you could say, where we're still seeing congestion. So whether it's the downtown tunnel, HRBT, the high-rise bridge corridor through the work zone there. Also, around the Deep Creek Bridge, we see congestion on all the approaches of the Deep Creek Bridge in that area. So once again, the locations that we were seeing congestion prior to the pandemic is where we're starting to really see congestion again in 2021. When you fast forward to the PM peak period on the peninsula, you see a lot more congestion up there, both directions at the HRBT, the Monitor Merrimack, even the James River Bridge going from Newport News Shipbuilding across to Allouez County. That's completely congested again now and during the PM peak period. Travel along Victory Boulevard going to Pocosin in the evening, that's congested. So once again, these are a lot of the locations that we saw in 2019 and now we're seeing them again in 2021. And on the PM on the south side, you see much more red showing up. Once again, all the bottlenecks that we saw in the morning, but you see some more, especially, for example, in Chesapeake, going down the Chesapeake Expressway. You see that congested during the PM peak period. I-264 throughout eastern Norfolk into Virginia Beach, you see congestion along those areas. These are maps that we included in the report, so if you want to look at specific locations in your locality, you can see that there. So one thing we do with all that information is we want to see, well, how much congestion is there in the region and how is that changing from year to year? So what this shows, the three pie charts on the top are showing the AM peak period and the three on the bottom are showing the PM peak period for the years 2019 on the left and then 2020 and 2021. So looking in the AM peak period in 2021, about 3% of our roadways were congested during the AM peak period. So while this is higher than the 2% we saw in the pandemic in 2020, it's only about half of what we're seeing and we saw in 2019. So even the congestion you saw on the map that I showed previously, it's about half in terms of what I would have showed you when we looked at the 2019 congestion. Looking at the PM peak period, it's a similar story. We always have more congestion during the PM peak period than the AM. But with the 8% of the network that we saw congested during the PM peak period in 2021, that's also just a little more than half of what we were seeing pre-pandemic in 2019 at 14%. So congestion is growing our region, but it has not returned quite yet to the pre-pandemic conditions that we were seeing here. One other thing we include in this report is we look at 10 of the busiest locations in our region, and we look at travel times there on an annual basis to see, is congestion getting worse? Is it getting better? What are the impacts of some projects we may have done there, for example? Just to let you know, the data that I show you on this, the average travel times, it's from a company called INRIX. And so they collect this probe information, I guess we'll call it, from a variety of sources. Some of it's from truck GPS, some of it's from anonymous cell phone information, things like that. But each year that goes on, it becomes a much, much more diverse set of data. So the data that I'll show you here is collected throughout the year by this company, and it's a very, very comprehensive set of data. So I'll show you a few examples out of those 10 for the sake of time. First one here is the HRBT. What was interesting to note here, and just to mention on the graphs here, what you see in blue is the AM peak period by year from 2013 moving to the right to 2021. What you see in red is the PM peak period. So, and the chart on the bottom left would be the eastbound direction going toward the south side, and the one that you see on the right is going westbound toward the peninsula. What was really interesting to us is when you look, at the eastbound direction going from the peninsula to the south side, travel times have really not returned to the levels we were seeing pre-pandemic. So they are increasing from 2020, but not quite to the level we saw 2019, 2018, 2017. When you go from the south side to peninsula, however, we have reached pre-pandemic conditions. So just to give an example, in the westbound direction during the PM peak period, it's about 30 minutes on average to travel from Ward's Corner to the other side of the water. That's almost exactly the same as what we saw in 2018 and 2019. So really interesting, not really sure why we would see a return to normal going one direction and not the other, but that is what the data is showing at the HRBT. And funny enough, you look at the Monitor Merrimack, exact same story. So if you're traveling from the peninsula to the south side, once again, it's higher than we saw in 2020, but not quite to the levels we were seeing pre-pandemic. However, if you go from the south side to the peninsula, you look at the PM in 2021 at over 9 minutes, that's higher than we had ever seen in the past. So we are definitely seeing more travel going from the south side to the peninsula than vice versa. So why? Maybe you have a better clue than I do. I don't know. But that it was interesting to see that in the data, that jumped out at us, that we are seeing a return to normal from going from the south side to the peninsula, but not quite when you go from the peninsula to the south side. Another example, look at the high-rise bridge. Same thing, sort of. We've largely returned to pre-pandemic travel times in that corridor, except when you go westbound toward Virginia Beach in the AM. So that's about 16 minutes compared to almost 20 minutes 2019. So there's so much is going on in this corridor with work zones and lane shifts and everything that it's, there's so many variables that are going on in this area. But it's interesting that for whatever reason, that particular direction has not, returned to pre-pandemic levels, but every other peak period and direction has. The last one I wanted to show you here is I guess I'll say, is a bit of good news. With all the widening projects that have occurred on the peninsula over the last few years beyond Williamsburg, based on the data we're seeing here, we're not seeing congestion whatsoever in this corridor going from roughly the Oyster Point area up to Williamsburg. So the travel times that we're seeing from INRIX are matching what would be considered the free flow travel times in this corridor. So definitely the widening project has alleviated all the congestion that we're seeing in this corridor, at least up to the Williamsburg area. As I mentioned, we recently released this report, so it was approved by the board at your last meeting in October. So this full report and a lot of the information I showed you today was included with the agenda, with last month's agenda. You can also access it on our website from the technical reports page or from our congestion management process page. And the last thing I wanted to mention is this isn't something that we just put on a shelf and stay there and revisit next year. The data that you see today feeds a lot of the planning processes that we have here at the TPO. Just to give a few examples here, the project prioritization process and the LRTP that we've talked a lot about today. A lot of this information feeds into that project prioritization process and helps us score the projects, both in the LRT and also the Transportation Improvement Program, and a lot of the scoring we're doing right now for RSTP funding here in the near future. We also use this in a lot of recurring regional studies. Just to give a couple examples, the regional freight study that we've started updating, we feed a lot of this information into there, and also some of the military transportation needs studies that we update every so many years. This type of information goes in there. And also any of the special studies that we conduct here at the TPO, a lot of this information obviously goes into those efforts. So with that, I'll open it up if you have any questions.
Thank you for your report. Any questions or comments, observations? Yes, Dr. Ward?
Thank you. Okay, you're right. Thank you, and I appreciate that. Of course, I heard going to the peninsula in the afternoon. I mean, it has really risen to pre-pandemic, and because I live right there and face this every day, but I didn't hear any answer, any kind of explanations. I don't know if it's accidents or any way of accounting for it, because it really is a monster, and it's daily. In fact, it's so bad that it's hard for me to even get from Greenbrier to my house at Dock Landing, because the traffic going to the peninsula every single day is backlogged. Or is it something in the Monitor Merrimack, or nothing to account for it?
Well, I'll go back to what you mentioned in terms of crashes. We are seeing a large increase of crashes and, unfortunately, especially fatalities in our region. We had record numbers last year in 2021, and we're seeing the numbers grow additionally here in 2022. People are driving faster, people are driving more reckless, more distracted driving, and it all adds up. And when you get those crashes and fatalities occurring more often, that obviously leads to much more congestion to go along with the safety issues along with that. So that's definitely part of it. Another thing we're seeing, and it really didn't show up in this data, is I showed you, traffic volumes have not quite returned to the levels we're seeing. We're seeing a lot more shifts from AM and PM peak to a flattening of it. So maybe less in the morning, but a lot more in the midday. And maybe it's still a little less in the PM, but it's still pretty high. So the impacts of that are really interesting. If you're used to driving, let's say, through a facility at 1:30 in the afternoon, and pre-pandemic, you drove right through it. Maybe now, there's a lot more traffic using it at that time of day rather than during the AM peak period, and it's leading to more congestion kind of in that off-peak period rather than the AM peaks and the PM peaks that we had always studied for in the past. So those are a couple causes that might be what you're seeing out there.
Thank you. I guess that means no solutions either.
Don't say that.
No, anticipated, okay, solutions, thank you. Just don't try.
So a couple of items just to mention in that corridor. So as we look forward to completion to all the projects under construction that we have, keeping in mind that we're, Chris, of course, making progress and through that process in Bowers Hill interchange, the environmental process, et cetera, and the Bowers Hill and the widening of 664 up to College has been identified as a future direction that our region wants to move towards. Just this morning, we spent quite a bit of time, mayors, of course, on our regional connector study as we talk about the importance of Monitor Merrimack and contemplating what that might look like as we get through the 2050 long-range transportation plan update. So I do think as the regional money has been allocated, that there's continued movement to continue around that beltway, if you will, and try to deal with some of these trends that Keith's pointing out to you today.
Thank you for that optimism.
Perhaps we need to invite you to one of our regional connector study meetings. So you'll have the same optimism we all have. My goodness.
Absolutely, we'd love to.
How much money are we spending? You said there's no hope? Any other questions, comments, observations? Yes.
Hi. I know that there was a report last month about the housing shortage in some of our cities and localities. So is there any kind of report that shows the number of people who live in their locality but work someplace else, because I think that that's, I mean, not that we're trying to make you all live, outside of Portsmouth. We know you want to come for our casino and for our jobs that are going to be there and our shipyard. But is there a report that shows the number of people that live in the city and then work someplace else that causes this? And thank you, Mr. Keith, for your report today.
Sure. Funny you should mention that. We actually include that information in our State of Transportation report that I mentioned. So just to give you background on that, in any given year pre-pandemic, it was roughly around 50% of our population would work in a locality that was different than the one they resided in. And that was typically second or third highest amongst all. We have a list of about 40 metropolitan areas that are comparable to us, between 1 and 4 million people. And that number I just gave was generally about second or third highest amongst all those in terms of the number of people that are going from one locality to the other. I've actually updated the data for 2021 for the state of transportation that's coming out in a couple months, and it was down to 42% now in 2021, largely with so many people working at home now, so many more working at home now, that so you get less of that longer travel, more people working at home. But we still rank second highest in terms of that when you look at 42% in 2021. So it's still definitely an issue that you see in our region, which means our transportation system needs to be much more regional in nature rather than local, just to accommodate all those people traveling from one locality to the other.
Just looking around to see if any more comments, because actually Mr. Grudendorf's talked about quality of life. So clearly, folks on the south side trying to get to the peninsula because of quality of life we have here. That's how you lose votes, statements like that. But anyway, we're getting close to the end of the meeting, but we still have another item to take care of, which is that photo. So
Yes, I would like to perhaps, if we could ask our members who will be, this will be their last TPO board meeting, and I know Mr. Green hasn't been able to arrive, but perhaps when he does, we could pick him up later. But Matt, if you wouldn't mind coming forward, and if I could ask the members to come forward, Mayor Raybill, Mayor Price, and any others, we would like to take care of that photo at the moment. Matt, where's the best spot?
Which way you want to,
Go ahead. I'm just going to.
which way you want to do it?
Go ahead, Matt. We'll have to be quick.
Actually, this one, I can make this work.
Go ahead. I don't want to crowd.
No. Okay. All right. Hey, Tom, the others are for you.
Go ahead, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
is anyone watching Mayor Duman to make sure we weren't photobombed?
Actually, maybe it was Greg you had to watch, right?
Now it brings us to item number 17.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 17 is approval of our consent agenda items. We have our minutes from the last meeting, of course, our monthly financial statement. We do have a series of TIP, Transportation Improvement Program amendments, that we continue to organize by locality, so you can see which of those projects might be within your locality. Mr. Chairman, we would request action by the board today to approve today's consent agenda.
Ask for a motion second to approve the consent items, please.
Second, Bobby Dyer.
All in favor? Opposes nay. Item number 18, Mr. Crum.
Yes, and with the chair's permission, maybe I'll handle the next couple all together. So just a couple of items. We have your 3-month tentative schedule. As a reminder, we will not be meeting as a TPO or a PDC in December. You'll be having your HRTPO and Harumpha board meetings in December. So our next meetings will be the third Thursday in January. You have with you in your agenda the minutes of our advisory committees. You have VDOT's HR TAC Program Development Monthly Executive Report. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, just 2 items to mention under old or new business or other business. First off, we are going to be doing a fairly significant changing of the room over the next 45 minutes as we prepare for a bit of a retreat style discussion with our HRPDC. Plenty of lunches in our 757 room, and if you'd like to join us for lunch, you could head on over to our reception area. We'd like to have everybody for lunch, but if you're staying for the PDC meeting, if you could please take your personal items with you, because we're going to be moving the tables around quite a bit. So that would really appreciate that. Secondly, as we point towards our January board meeting, we will be convening our nominating committee and presenting for the nominating committee to present recommendations to this board in January for our next chair and vice chair of the HRTPO. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Back to you, sir.
Any other new business? Well, I'll remind you that this is our last meeting of the year. The next meeting is going to be in January. So with that, have a great Thanksgiving and holiday season. We are adjourned. Stay for lunch if you can.